Hi, welcome. My name is Sue and I work at the Whitby Public Library, and I'm going to be facilitating this recording of Seed Saving for Beginners. In a moment, I'm going to hand it over to Alex, who also works at the Whitby Public Library and is passionate about gardening. We already have 3 videos up on our YouTube channel at Whitby Library about gardening. And if you like this one, please check out the others as well. Alex, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Sue. I am going to go ahead and share the presentation. Now, there we go. I think everybody should be able to see this now.
Looks good.
Perfect. Let's just get started. So, seed saving. Fall is the time for seed saving. It's the time that a lot of plants, they've already gone through their life cycle. They've given you what they need or what you need, why you planted them. And at this point in the game, they have either started producing their seed or have already produced their seed. And we're going to talk about why seed saving is a really useful skill, why it's important for our environment, and ultimately a really great useful skill just to add to your toolkit for the whole experience of gardening. Let's get into it. This is our agenda today. So there are a couple different types of seed saving, and I'll talk about them briefly. Then we're going to get into a little bit of history, mostly about where seed saving went. It's not a very common thing that you hear, but it is growing in popularity, which is awesome. And then we'll talk about how to save seed from a few easy plants, how to store them, because that's very important. And then we will answer some questions. So my goal for everyone today is to learn why seed saving is an important skill in today's climate, and learn some basic seed saving methods for home gardening. All right. So what exactly is seed saving? It is simply collecting the seeds at the end of the season from your plants to use for the future, to share with friends, to share with your neighbors, or to donate to seed libraries, or whatever your intention is. Seed saving, there's plants that produce seed every year. There's produce seed every other year or only in their second year. So we'll talk about that. It's also a sustainable and contributes to the cyclical nature of gardening. If you're planting a plant and collecting the seed from it, and then it's producing seed, which you're collecting, you can then use that seed to plant, and it creates new plants. So a complete circle, complete cycle. That's how seeds were and plants were done in history before the sale of seeds, before seeds became available to purchase. People saved their seed and they traded it with their friends and their neighbors and their families, and just how it was done. Once seeds were available for sale, it became less popular because of convenience, but there is an interest now because of the loss of some genetic diversity in that process. So saving seed contributes to genetic diversity, food security, a healthy environment, and it also saves you money because you don't have to buy more plants or more seeds. Little bit of history about where seed saving went. A long time ago, before the commercialization of seeds, I mentioned people saved their seeds, and they did so based on traits. And when you select based on traits, it means that you're choosing the good traits. So you want maybe plants that grew to the right size or the perfect color or at the right time of year, or they were able to withstand unusual conditions or maybe some cooler weather, which was in your favor and their favor. So choosing based on traits is what, when you collect those seeds and you plant them, it develops plants that are adapted to that specific region's climate. And those seeds grow best in that area. So saving seed creates plants that grow better in your area. Once starting to be sold in about 1790, companies realized that people want to buy seed because it's really easy. And because of the demand, and I mean, today we see packages of seeds at the store. It's very, very common. You can find lots of seeds, but the companies that I guess own these seeds and produce seeds make them in mass amounts, like mass production of these seeds, and they are not catered towards the environment that you might be growing them in because they have to make so many. So it's just a generic seed. It's made to grow anywhere. You might not always get the best, strongest plant out of it. It might not produce as much as it could. And as well, they're generic varieties of those plants. So that's where we have started to see the loss of some variety. And we're going to talk about it in the next slide, why that's important to have variety and genetic diversity. I mentioned it creates a strong environment, but yeah, let's go to the next one because I think there's more information on there. There we go. Why save seeds today? We want to save seeds because it preserves that genetic diversity. It contributes to some of, I guess, alleviating some of the loss that we've experienced in varieties of plants. It might also help with growing things that taste really good. I mean, flavor, nutrition, unique varieties, they all have traits that you might not find at the store. So there's a reason for doing that. Same with acclimated varieties. Now, the one example I wanted to share was the Irish potato famine. So that was in the 1800s. So once they started selling seeds, the Irish were given one variety of potato, and then a blight hit that crop, and there was massive consequences to that. It basically wiped out their potato crops. And so that is one of the reasons that you want a genetically diverse, strong, adapted variety if you're planning to grow things, because if it's only one variety, it can be susceptible to disease, pests, poor weather conditions, and ultimately the answer is just genetic diversity. So it's a growing movement now. You'll see lots of seed banks or libraries and exchanges growing in popularity. We are hoping to have a seed library soon at the Whitby Library. You can find information once we post it on our website. So make sure you're following all of our social media if that's interesting to you. There are also lots of other ways, though, to participate in this movement. You can simply save your seeds at home, trade with your friends and neighbors. You know, I have this really great tomato. I loved the flavor of it. I'm going to give it to my neighbor. They also want to grow tomatoes. It's a great way to participate in that community and that movement. So, one other thing I wanted to mention in relation to seed libraries was a difference in the types of seed saving. So I mentioned this earlier. There is a pretty well-known seed library called the Richmond Grows Seed Lending Library, and it is in California in the States, but they are quite a big name, and they share a lot of really great resources in regards to seed saving. And so I watched a web by them, and one thing that they shared was difference in seed saving on any day versus this type of seed saving that you might do in a crisis. Now, the current pandemic situation, we're not in the same state that we were in back in the spring. However, experiences and time like this push people to learn to be a little bit more self-sufficient, and perhaps lots of people started a garden. You may have been one of them, just to make like you had something to do, you had a source of vegetables, just that air of uncertainty was helped by that. So when you're seed saving, if you started a garden, there's two different types. You're interested in preservation of, for instance, unique varieties or cultural varieties of plants that would maybe be considered more typical. The word used was a purist, so you want to preserve that specific variety, compared to seed saving in a crisis or in times of uncertainty, where you just want to save seed because you want stuff to grow next year, or you're not so worried about if your varieties cross or if you come up with a new one, as long as it tastes good and you have something good to eat or something to share with your friends and your family. So I thought that it was important to note those differences, because ultimately your intention when it comes to seed saving is your own. And as long as you're happy you're doing and understand that there's lots of different reasons for doing it, it's okay. A few of the takeaways from the webinar that I attended were the awareness that you get about the food system and where our food comes from, and the cyclical nature of gardening really comes about and is made pretty clear when you start to save your seed and you realize what goes into it. The second bit was the intention. Ultimately, you can, like I said, whether it's to preserve varieties or to just save food for next year, seeds for next year, it's all good. Just take it and run with it. And it's easy and it's fun. And yeah, so let's get into talking about some ways to save seed. So some are easier to save from than others. If you're an absolute beginner, there are easier plants to save from. And the list is here. So you've got beans and peas and lettuce, tomatoes, peppers, beets, chard, parsley, which is an herb, and then marigolds, which are flowers. I talk about saving seed from some of these vegetables as well as some flowers, and I have some marigolds that I'm going to show you how to save the seed from. So the reason you want to start with easier plants to save from is because a lot of these plants are self-pollinated, and we're going to talk about that here. So this says cross-pollination, but the opposite of that is self-pollination. Self-pollinating plants, like the ones you see here, except for peppers, I think they can cross with each other. You don't need to worry so much about crossing. So if you have a couple different varieties, they won't cross, and you won't end up with that produce plants different from parent plants. So that's what I mean. You the easier ones don't need to worry about that. Cross pollination here can happen when you have different varieties, when they're planted together. You might get seed that produces a mixed variety or not one that looks like the mother plant. And so this would be a case of a hybrid plant. There's nothing wrong with that. It just means that it's a different variety. So if your intention is to maintain the purity of a variety of plant, you would want to make sure that you're not allowing any of this cross pollination to happen. and certain varieties that happens a lot easier with. So that's why they're a little bit harder. I shouldn't say hard, there's just a few extra steps that you need to take to ensure that this doesn't happen. So the easy way to do that, if you're a beginner, is to only plant one variety. So next slide here, I've listed a couple families. So there's the Apiaceae, the cucurbits, and the brassicas, and those families, and you'll see the list underneath, those plants are likely, or they have the potential to cross with each other when you plant them close to each other. And if you want to avoid, you either want to make sure you're taking the proper distances in mind, which sometimes is hard because in home gardening, you don't have a ton of space. And when I research the distances for planting these to ensure no cross-pollination, it can be far. It can be about, it could be a half mile. Like it's hard to do that in a home garden. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting. The I have another note under here. That's all I had to say about that. Just some information to keep in mind if you're interested in growing these. Like I said, if you are and you don't want them to cross, just plant one of them, and then you know for sure. Okay, so let's get into. Yes, Sue.
The headings that were at the top of those 3 columns, what do those words mean? They
Yes.
all end in the same thing. I'm just
So
curious.
it's a family, yeah, it's a family name. I could answer if I had some more time to look into it. I just know that like, you know how there's like genus, species, family, variety in like the, oh shoot, it's
No, I love what you're saying because yeah, there's so much to it, and no, I don't know. So I'm wondering, I don't know how you say this, but Apiaceae, that's a
Apiaceae.
family that's a family of vegetables?
Yeah, so they're similar, and you'll notice that if you let them go to seed, some of their seeds look similar, like the way they produce seed looks similar. So,
Ah,
for instance, cilantro and parsley, like they almost look identical when they're growing. If you're not familiar with it, you could definitely mistake one for the other until you tasted it. Um,
okay, yeah, that's really neat. And I see in the middle column like pumpkin, squash, watermelon. Yeah, their
mhm.
seeds are similar.
Yeah, yeah, similar seeds. They grow the same way. Um, with the pollination of these ones, because they are a little bit harder, some of these also require hand pollination. If you don't have really active bees or pollinators in your garden, some squashes need to be hand pollinated. And all those plants, they produce like the male and female flowers. And it's just a
Okay.
matter of like taking one of the flowers and pollinating the other flower. And then if you're trying to preserve that variety, taping it up or making sure that no other pollinators can go in there.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I guess that's a whole nother program.
it could be a whole other program. That's why this is a seed saving for beginners.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
It's
Thank you for
definitely
the information.
no problem. All right, let's get into that easy seed saving. So if you are intending to save seeds, here's a few things that you want to make sure you know really before you plant the plant, because one, you need to know what the healthy mature seed looks like, and this is different for every plant. Some plants, their seeds are ready when the plant is ready to eat. For instance, a tomato, when it is red or whatever color it's supposed to be when it's ripe, that seed is ready. But on to compare that to perhaps a bean or a cucumber, the seed is not ready when you would pick it to eat it. You would have to leave a lot longer for the seed to develop. So depending on your plant, you want to know, if you're intending to save the seeds from it, you want to know at what point the seeds are ready. And I always recommend Google or YouTube when it comes to this. Pictures can help, or just some simple instructions. For the ones that we're going to talk about, I'll tell you when those are ready. Um, Say, for instance, you harvested it before the seed was ready, you're not going to get a mature seed and it wouldn't produce a plant. Exactly. It probably wouldn't do anything. So then, in addition, you also want to make sure you know what a healthy seed looks like, or healthy, like a good quality seed looks like. And that's a matter of just picking seeds from the best plant, the plant that you thought tasted the best, or the one you thought grew really well. Maybe another one got some disease. You don't want to save from that one. You want to save from the really healthy, strong plants. And the more the better, again, for genetic diversity. So next you want to remove the chaff, debris, or gel. And these are just the protective layers protecting the seeds. So chaff you'll find mostly on flowers or perhaps lettuce. Debris, I'm just talking about like dirt or dust or anything. And then gel you usually find in tomatoes or cucumbers, zucchinis, squash, that sort of thing. So you want to know how to remove it. That way your seeds can be preserved properly, which leads into the next point. You want to make sure you can dry them properly, select them. So that's, I guess, choosing the best quality seeds and storing them properly, because it's very, very important that if you're going to all the work to save them, that you store them right and don't lose all of that work to just a bit of moisture. And like I said, Google is your best friend when it comes to this kind of information. All right. We're going to talk about beans and peas. So they are ready to save when the pod has dried on the vine, when it's brown, when it's leathery. This picture that I took the other day, this one is not ready. As you can see, it's still green, but I just wanted to show how big it can get. So remember when I mentioned knowing how long, or how to leave the plant to grow until the seeds are mature. You definitely wouldn't want to eat this bean. It's probably a little bit tough. It's too big, but that's what you need to do if you're intending to save the seeds from it. You would have picked this one weeks and weeks ago if you just wanted to eat the bean, but the seed. So you want to make sure it becomes completely brown and crisp on the vine. And once it's at that state, you just pick them, you pull the shells open, and you collect them. And then you want to make sure they dry again, just to be sure they're absolutely dry before you store them. And we're going to talk about storing after we go through all the seed saving. Tomatoes and peppers. So these ones are to save when the fruit is ripe for eating. So when your tomato is the right color, I don't want to just say red because there's lots of different colors of tomatoes and I love the funny colored ones. When it's ripe, so it should be a little bit soft. If you go and feel it, if it falls off when you just wiggle it gently, it's ripe and ready for eating. So tomatoes and peppers, you're just going to cut it open and you're going to scrape the seeds out. With tomatoes, there's a lot of juice and pulp inside. You want to rinse those out using a strainer. And for both the seeds, you're going to want to let them dry again for at least, I would say at least 10 days. Like if you can wait 2 weeks, that would be great. There's an additional step with tomato seeds, and we'll go over that in the next slide about how to wash them and ferment them. And I just wanted to note here that peppers may cross with other peppers. They're that kind. So if you're trying to preserve one variety, you want to just plant that one variety, or you want to make sure you're covering the flowers with, I have it here, like a little jewelry bag made of fine mesh that will just make sure that they don't cross-pollinate. But if that is, if you're interested in doing that, definitely research it before you do it. So fermenting tomato seeds. So these are the steps. In the first picture, top left hand there, I've just squeezed out the tomato seeds after cutting the tomato. There's lots of pulp and juice, so what I like to do is use a strainer to clean it out, and you got to get your hands in there and kind of rub them and remove some of that. They're clean enough, then you can put them in a glass jar or container. I prefer glass. Typically, you can also, I've also seen people use like a little egg cup, like a hard-boiled or soft-boiled egg cup. You just cover it. It doesn't need to breathe when it's in there. It's okay to just leave the jar closed. And you're going to want to let it ferment in that jar at least 3 days. I've gone like a week before. So actually that jar in the picture, I have it here beside me. It's been a few days. I don't know if you can see, but the water's gone a little bit cloudy. I can also show it later when I close the presentation, but it's got a few more days to go. And then what I'm going to do is rinse it again. And then I'm going to spread them on a plate or a pie plate to dry out. Now the picture I have of the dry seeds on the pie plate, those aren't the same seeds that were in the jar. Just when I was taking the process photos for this, I obviously couldn't pretend to have dry seeds. So I had to use other seeds that had already been drying. Once they are completely dry, and I'm talking at least 10 days, I mean, depending on your environment, if you're in a really dry environment, it might dry sooner, but you really want to make sure they're dry. And then you want to store them in something that is breathable, just so that no moisture can get trapped in there. Yeah, so that goes for all types of seeds. And then let's move on to the next one. We're going to talk about lettuce. Lettuce seeds, if you want to save your lettuce seeds, you have to let the plant bolt. And by that, I mean it starts to grow a stalk from the very middle. Once that stalk develops, it's going to produce flowers. They're typically yellow. And then once those flowers start to dry and they become fluffy, that's when they are ready to cut off the stalk, hang it upside down with a bag so that they don't fall out, let it dry for about 2 weeks. The bolting typically happens at the end of the lettuce's season. So if you're somebody who grows lettuce, like starting it in the spring when it's cooler, it'll probably bolt as the weather gets hotter outside. It just because lettuce doesn't like to grow in the hot summer heat, so it'll bolt at the end of that. The plant though that has bolted, like you can't really harvest it after it has bolted. If that's what it's going to do and that's what you want it to do, you want to leave it to do that. It needs to have that energy to produce that seed. Once they're dry in that bag, it's been the right amount of time, all you need to do is remove the chaff. So you want to rub the dry flowers in between your hands, preferably over a container, and then all the seeds will fall out into the container. So this, onions, leeks, and shallots. Now I have never saved seed from these. There's a couple steps that it takes. So if you're interested in that, I recommend that you research it. Simple YouTube videos will show you how. These require overwintering, which I have never done successfully. I have tried with celery. It didn't work, but essentially you leave the plant over the winter in the dirt. You might have to protect it because we do get pretty cold winters and the frost can I think that's what happened to my celery. I think the frost killed it. And even in the spring, it didn't come back. So that's an extra step. These are what are considered like a biennial plant because they produce seed in their second year, not their first year. So these ones are ready once their blossoms have dried. So either on the plant or in a dry place. If you've picked them and you store them in a dry place like a shed, just make sure they're upright because the flower, I think the seeds, if they're loosened a bit, they'll come out. You'll know that they are ready. The seeds are ready when they're black. That is what I've read. So I'm sharing that information with you. Yeah. And if anybody has with this, please do share it with me. I would love to find out. So next, let's talk about flowers. Most flowers have seeds are ready once that flower has finished blooming and that it's dried up. The picture I have here is of purple echinacea or like purple coneflower. As you can see, the petals are completely dry. The seed head or the top of it is black. That's all that's left. So I cut it off the plant and then and I'll show you. I've put them in a paper bag. And they've been drying for, it was September 12th. I put them in a bag. They're already pretty dry. What you do to release the seed is you can break it up with your hands. You can like bang it around as long as you don't rip the bag. Another way I've seen to release the seed of these is to put them in like an old coffee container. And this, I learned this from a YouTube video. You put them in an old coffee container, close the lid, and just shake it up. And then the seeds just fall out naturally. You can get rid of the heads. The seeds are at the bottom. Very, very easy. I will show you the seeds of that once we close the presentation, and I can do the little demonstration. Same with the marigold seeds. So that's what I'll show you as well. The marigold seeds, once they have dried on the plant, you can pick those off, let them dry further, and then you just pull the seeds right out. They're very, very easy to save from. If you're wanting to show kids how to save some seeds, they're a very easy way to start with that. Okay. One more thing about flower seeds. Birds love flower seeds. So if your intent is to have like wildlife in your garden, leave your seed heads there and you will definitely bring tons of birds. Goldfinches love it. It's nice. You provide some seed for them. You definitely don't need to save all the seed from one plant. I mean, from one head of dried flower, you can get tons of seed. So whatever you don't need, you can just leave. So what not to save? The most important one here I recommend is the hybrid plants. So these are the potentially crossed ones. Now that is for the ones on the list that I showed you that have that potential to cross with their families. Unless you don't care and you just, you want to grow and whatever comes out of it, you'll grow it and you're not intending to save them from a purist or preservation standpoint. So when I say don't say, like don't say and donate to causes that want preserved varieties. If it's just for you, I say go ahead. The patented varieties and the GMO stuff, not really an issue for home gardeners, but it's worth mentioning. Okay. Now we're on to storage. So when I say 100% dry, I mean 100% dry. If you're in doubt, leave them for an extra few days. There are ways to test whether your seed is completely dry or not. You can pinch it. If it dents and stuff, it's not necessarily dry. Like if it just kind of crumples. I've read of testing it by like do this outside, but take your seed out, put it on a surface and use a hammer and smash it. And if it shatters, it's completely dry. If it just kind of crumples, it's not dry yet. So that's why it's good to store them in paper after this point, just in case there is any sort of moisture, it will remove itself. If you are storing your seeds for longer, or you intend to store them in the fridge or freezer, which prolongs the life of a seed greatly, you'll want to choose glass just because it keeps the humidity out. That's just worth noting. And another important thing when you're storing is to absolutely label everything, especially if you're saving it yourself. You want to know what plant it is, what year you saved that seed, and any other notes that you might want to remember the next time you go back to plant them. So I have my seeds. I don't know if you'll be able to see, but I've got just a plastic tub, and inside I've got my little packages of seeds, and that's where I keep them. Glass jars or prescription bottles aren't bad to use either. Like I have a bottle from vitamins. They are quite useful, especially for bigger seeds like beans and things like that. You'll want a bigger container. Glass jars are good. Or whatever you have. Ultimately, as long as you're not leaving them in a humid place, then you can, they'll keep for a while. Different seeds have different lives, so some seeds don't last as long in storage as others. You can research whatever seed you're saving to see how long it'll last typically, but ultimately the conditions that you're storing it in are what will contribute the most to the life of the seed. Alrighty. Let's talk about this just before we go on to any questions. If you have old seeds and you're not sure if they're good or not, and this goes for even like old packages of seeds that you've had in your shed for a long time, maybe some vegetables or flowers, and you don't know if they're good or not. You can test to see if these seeds are still good. And an easy way to do that is by placing about 10 seeds, 10 seeds, on a wet paper towel, roughly for about 2 weeks. Put them in a window or something, but keep it moist. Remove them as they germinate and count how many germinate. So however many out of 10 you have germinate, that's your percentage. That's like 80% chance. Say if there's 8 that germinate out of the 10, that's an 80% chance of germination rate. And that helps you know how many seeds to start when you're planting them next year or the next time you want to use them. If your intent is to save seeds and you have a low germination rate, make sure you plant whatever you can and save new seeds so that you can replenish that store of seeds if you want to keep it. Alrighty, glad we got through that. Sue, any questions?
Sorry, Alex, just unmuting. I do kind of two questions about the same thing. When you're doing your seed saving, is it okay to put the seeds into plastic baggies when you're drying them or when you're storing them?
When you're drying them, no, it should definitely be in paper, or you can put them on a plate just with open air to dry. If you're just transferring seeds, like if you're giving somebody seeds, you can put them in plastic, but I don't recommend long-term storage in plastic just because if you are putting that in a fridge or a freezer, moisture can seep in through that plastic. So that's the reason you don't want to do that.
Thank you. And do you happen to have, are you able to show us how you purchased those little envelope packets that you put your seeds into? Because they were kind of perfect.
Yes, so this is a little coin envelope. I purchased these from Staples. You can find them where like the coin wrappers are. Little envelopes. They're just couple inches by a few inches. They're really good for a lot of different types of seeds.
Okay, thank you. And you alluded earlier to a seed saving library
Yes.
or library exchange. Do tell.
Okay. So yes, if this is something you're interested in, I mean, there you can always research local seed libraries, but that is in the making for Whitby Library. So as of right now, if you save seed to donate to a seed library, make sure you are saving, make sure you are storing correctly, and when we are open to accept donations and to offer a seed library, we will share that information on our all our channels and our social media, and definitely our website.
Right, so we're going to try and make that happen in the spring.
So typically, seed libraries open in the spring for borrowing. The way they work is you can borrow from a seed library. There will be little packages of seeds typically. The intent is that you'll borrow, plant your plants, hopefully have the chance to save some seed from them, and then in the fall, when those seeds are ready, donate them back. So that's why the fall is typically the time to save seeds and donate seeds.
Okay,
Now, everything's a little behind right now, so we're working towards that, but hopefully soon we
okay,
will be able to. Yeah.
absolutely. And so your email is up on the screen. If people have seeds that they'd like to donate and are interested in hearing about what happens with this, they can email you.
Yes, please. Any questions about seed saving, or even if you garden questions in general, and if you're interested in the other garden programs posted on our website, my email is there. It's at the beginning of this presentation too. Do send me an email. I love to talk about gardening.
Well, thank you, Alex. That was extremely informative. It went from a history lesson with the potato famine to a little bit of Latin with the families of the vegetables. I feel like I've learned
It
so
did.
much.
I'm going to close stop sharing the presentation here, just so I can show you how to save the marigold seeds before we end quickly.
Perfect.
So I hope that the angle of the camera is okay. I'm just going to tip it down here so you see this plate of seeds. So I've got this white, just a paper plate, makes it easy to see. But these are the little seed heads for the marigolds, and I've picked these off once they were dry from the plant. There's
How
still
old are
some dried
those?
pods. I picked
Yeah.
these off not even a week ago, but I mean
Oh,
the plants I planted back in May.
okay. So that's about a
So
week old.
when I would say about a week, yes, but it was already pretty dry on the plant. At this point, I've kept it in a paper bag, and I'm just gonna pull it apart and show you. Like I said, they're really, really easy to save seed from. All you have to do is pretty much yank the seeds out of the pod, and there they go. They're these little spiky things. So those are the marigold seeds. If you can see that, okay.
Yep.
Um, you want to get rid of the other stuff because that's just chaff. Throw it in your compost or whatever, but they're very, very easy to save seeds from, and kids love doing it. So if you are new and you just want to try something, just pick some marigold heads off and see where that gets you. What I'm going to do is save these further. I'm going to stick these back in the paper bag, probably for another week before I store them. And so, yeah, that's what I'm going to do with that.
So Alex,
Other-
would you
yep.
start those inside in the early spring, or are you just going to plant those right in the ground when the time comes?
So I'm going to start them in little pots. My hope is to start this little cold frame, but even if you have like a windowsill in your house that you can start plants in, I recommend just setting up some pots of dirt there, starting some seeds. And when they're, a few inches tall or so, strong enough, get them used to going outside as it's getting warmer. Maybe bring them inside at night still if it's still going cool in the spring. But then when they're strong enough, you can certainly just pop them in the dirt. Kind of like when you buy them already started. That's that stage there that you would just put them in the garden.
Great. And cooler at night. Uh, what is a safe temperature to have them out at night when you begin? Like, is 3 degrees okay, or 5 degrees, or is it zero that's the breaking point?
Um, I'd say it depends on how big the plant is and where you're leaving them outside. Like
Okay.
if they're exposed to a lot of elements or a lot of wind, it's going to feel colder for them. But if you want to leave them outside and maybe you're unsure if they're quite like you could always cover them with a cardboard box at night just to keep some of the cool off of them or
Okay.
cover them, protect them from the wind, maybe.
Okay. That sounds like a fun project.
Yeah, it's easy. Um, the only other thing I wanted to show was the coneflower seeds. Those ones are small. If you can see them okay. They're the just little black ones here.
Those are
These are some chaff bits. These are just some of the seeds that I got from the coneflower, and it's still in the bag that it was. So
Is that coneflower the same as echinacea?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hmm.
All right. Sorry, did I see that you had a slide with some resources on it?
I do. So if you're interested in any of the resources, let's just go back to it so I can talk a bit about them. If
Coming.
okay, there we go. So
Perfect.
um, Seeds of Diversity Canada, really great resources on seed saving of all different types. They also have information about why biodiversity and like genetic diversity is important, good reasons for seed saving. There is a Toronto Seed Library, and they also share lots of great information if you're interested. And just a couple references that I used in coming up with the presentation at the bottom there. But if you are interested in seed saving, lots of resources there. You can also always email me, and I'm happy to share information that I found along my seed saving journey.
Thank you again, Alex.
You're very welcome.
Um, I don't have any other questions right now. Thank you for leaving us with your email address. Hopefully, we'll get some things happening even through the winter, and
Yes,
and do
yes.
some more programming to come.
Sounds great.